Hey, it's Dylan Webster. I'm a writer. I have been working on my horror novel. I got the first draft done and I've been editing it, and that is quite the journey. But I wanted to jump on here and talk about something that is not in the horror genre. And I thought it would be a fitting time considering that this month marks the 30th anniversary of David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, the book that you either love or you detest. The book that a lot of people haven't read, and the book by which David Foster Wallace is probably going to be judged, at least in terms of fiction. I did want to get on here and talk about it. I actually just recently read this novel. Last year, I finished it reading with a friend of mine, and I was very surprised. I'm not going to lie, the first 200 pages are really hard to get through. And that's a huge sell to try to tell someone, just hold on for 200 pages, and then it gets really good. But if you do happen to make it past the 200 pages, I think what you find is an incredibly affecting book, a really human book, a novel that really delves into the idea of connection. A lot of people have already talked about it, so I'm not going to hound on this part. But David Foster Wallace definitely foresaw a lot of the issues and disconnection and loneliness that we were going to feel in the coming years, that he himself clearly felt. But when you read it, he really does have a way to talk about that kind of loneliness and talk about the seeking connection, to talk about addiction, to talk about a lot of people say entertainment, but I think it's it is entertainment, but really it's addiction. It's addiction to entertainment, to amusement, to being kind of just there. um it's a really interesting novel. I think more people should read it. I would not call it a perfect novel, but it is a novel that stuck with me after I read it. I finished this a few months back, and I find myself thinking back to it. I find myself thinking back to Don Gately, especially. Don Gately is a character in here who's not particularly well educated. He's kind of weird and awkward, and kind of just fumbling around, but he's trying to make it through. And there's something for anyone that's read this novel. There's something I think about all the time when towards the end, and he's talking about the idea of just abiding, to just abide and make it through. And I think that's very human. Hal is a really interesting character, a surprisingly shallow character, and with as much time as you spend with Hal, you still feel disconnected from Hal. And I think that's really an interesting thing. As a writer, I think that's a really interesting choice to make. It's an engaging book. There's a lot of great things in this book. There are also things I definitely did not enjoy. There are things that kind of hold it up a little bit. But if there's one thing I would say about it, is I do think it's a novel I would want to come back to. And in my personal opinion, if a novel is something I want to come back to, then I would have to regard it as a success. So 30 years on, I still think you should read Infinite Jest.